Micah Norton, saying he was going with him and Kevin McDonald to the rec center tomorrow to work out. The next few days passed quietly. JR had a swim meet against Kansas. By August 30th at 4:30 a.m., JR wakes up and puts on his Texas Tech swimming jersey. He plans to meet Charlie and Brent over to the Sibley at 5 a.m. At 5 a.m. at the Sibley, JR and Charlie work on their strokes. But they would take periodic breaks to watch Brent Clark make his triple somersault dive. Meanwhile, in Lincoln, Nebraska, Jim gets on the private plane feeling contrite. Even though there are times at 26 years of marriage, he wonders why he stays with Betsy. He realizes she is the mother of his children. By 8:05 a.m., JR goes to the Pass Center at Texas Tech West Hall to take his first government exam about the U.S. and Texas Constitution and about inherent and implied powers of the U.S. Constitution. By 9 a.m., JR goes to the entrance fountain after taking his government test. Hey, JR, do you want to have dinner tonight? I thought you might be tired of eating at the Crockett House, Karen said. Don't worry, no Brad. It's just you and me. He has some math exam tomorrow. Yeah, I'll pick you up at your grandmother's house. How do you know where it's at? Charlie Nation found your address in last year's student phone book. Charlie Nation. That dude is a creep. 10 a.m. In Spanish class, JR is conjugating verbs. He was relieved that on Wednesday they would go back to vocabulary. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, Jim and Claude find the rig is in good service. The only thing that needed fixing was the joint coupling on the rig scaffolding. I'll tell you what, Clyde Johnson, you're one of the best foremen I got. But if I find out the scaffolding is rigged again, you're fired, Jim said. By 11 a.m., JR is having lunch with Brent Clark and Charlie Nation. I got to tell you, I hope you don't dump Karen Crowder, Charlie said. I was walking back to the dorm. Was walking back from the dorm from from the journalism building this morning, and I saw JR and Karen sitting by the fountain, cozy as can be, Brent said. I wouldn't call it cozy. We are meeting after statistics class to study the Constitution together, and then we're having dinner. Are you going to try to get in the sack? Charlie asked. No, man. That's your style. And that's my father's style. No thanks, JR said. 1:05 p.m. In statistics class, JR learns about describing and displaying data, along with some of the other stuff that had been mentioned the previous week before. By 2 p.m., Mary Jo, the chauffeur, pulls up in front of Karen's house. Hey, Karen said. She gets in the car. Good to see you, JR. There is a pause as Joe, the driver, brought the engine to a start and starts driving toward Joe's Burgers. Are we going to be civil this time? Karen asked. I promise, JR said. Because this thing between you and Brad is getting old. I mean, I'm sorry. So many times you criticize Brad. You're too used to having... You're so close to losing a good friendship. Alright, look. You want to settle things between me and Brad? Let's go home to Odessa this weekend. We can meet in Jim Bob Horton's house and make a settlement once and for all. By 5:30 p.m., JR and Karen are talking in the restaurant. Full again, sweetie, Karen said. Praise Jesus, JR said, also full. I like your friends. You haven't met Ken yet. No, I haven't. But the other ones, you don't come on so strong, JR. That's why I like you. I want to have a chance to keep dating. The way I saw you gliding over in the library like a Christian princess, I knew that I like you, JR said. Later on in the car after leaving the restaurant. Isn't this nice? Yes. I want to stay this way. Not talk about your father's liberal business policies. Pathetic. Yes, honey. Pathetic. 6:20 p.m. JR arrives back at the dorm and listens to Blake Carter recorded Rush Limbaugh while talking to Kevin McDonald about the news. Kevin was angry because he felt that Clinton was trying to get America in a quagmire in Bosnia and Somalia. The next day, was August the 31st. At 3:40 a.m., both JR and Kevin are up early. Kevin has soccer practice at 5, and so he is studying his management systems textbook as JR is studying his Spanish and public speaking. By 9:30 a.m., JR arrives at Spanish lab and puts on headphones to work on an in-lab assignment. The assignment is a pop quiz in the lab textbook. By 12 p.m., JR and Kevin McDonald are having sloppy joes at the Crockett House dining hall. At 1 p.m., JR thought that swim practice would be at the rec center. Instead, Brent Clark ran into him and told him that it was going to be at the Sibley at the major pool being used for varsity workouts. Meanwhile, in Midkiff, Jim is miffed because the hydraulics were weak. At 3 p.m., with swimming practice over, JR decides to go to the library today. By 5:20 p.m., JR gets dinner with Kevin McDonald at the Crockett House dining hall. He is tired, but he knows he still has public speaking at 6 o'clock tonight. By 6 p.m., public speaking class is underway. John McCone begins the lecture on the fundamentals of public speaking. Even though it was a large lecture hall that said no food or drink, John McCone didn't mind if students would like to, like JR, buy in a Dr. Pepper and a snack to help keep awake. 7 p.m. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Jim and Betsy get into yet another argument over Kyle wanting to return home for a few days for Labor Day weekend. Jim announces that he won't be there, but instead he would be campaigning for some budgetary help via jobs from President Bill Clinton. He gets in the Lincoln that he drives and calls Claude to meet him at the condo in Midland, in near Midland International Airport. By 7:20 p.m. at the condo, Jim drinks a couple of margaritas. Angry at Betsy, angry at Kyle, angry at his secretary. He feels like he's being stifled in West Texas and longs to return to Washington, D.C. At 8:05 p.m., Jim is drunk, reminiscing with Claude about the summer 1966 wildcatting days with William Holden, Kevin Mercer, and John Hoteling. Jim was going on and on about how John had liked and loved Kiss Me Quick by Elvis and was